You were 7 years old when you learned to read a room before you spoke. Not because you were mature, not because you were gifted, because you had to be. Because in your house, silence wasn't neutral. It was information. It was weather. It was the pressure drop before a storm. You learned that your mother's quiet could mean danger. You learned that your father's footsteps could mean a mood you'd have to manage. You learned that peace didn't happen by itself. Peace was a job, and somehow, without anyone ever saying it out loud, you were hired. That's the part people don't understand. You didn't grow up early because you wanted to. You were forced into a psychological role that should never exist. A child became the emotional adult. And it didn't just make you tough. It carved rare traits into your nervous system. Traits that look impressive on the outside, but cost you deeply on the inside. Trait psychology is only recently getting better at naming, studying, and explaining. So if you were the kid who became the adult before you were ready, if this is already hitting too close, subscribe and drop a comment. Not for attention, for proof. Proof you're not the only one carrying this. Now let's break down what that experience actually did to you. The name for what happened in psychology has a word for it: parentification. Parentification is when a child is pushed into responsibilities, emotional or practical, that belong to the adults. It can look obvious: raising siblings, cooking meals, paying bills. But the version that rewires you the most is the one people miss: emotional parentification. That's when you become the therapist, mediator, peacekeeper, emotional support animal, and stability anchor for the people who were supposed to provide stability for you. A child's nervous system is not built to carry adult emotions. When you make a child do that during critical developmental years, it doesn't just stress them out. It teaches their brain a new definition of love, safety, and worth. Love becomes something you earn through performance. Safety becomes something you create by predicting mood's worth, becomes tied to being useful, calm, mature, and low maintenance. And once those rules are installed early, you don't simply grow out of it, you live by them. Now here's the twist. That rewiring created traits in you that are genuinely rare. Some will make you successful. Some will sabotage your relationships. Most will do both at the same time. Let's talk about them. Trait number 1, hypervigilant empathy. You can read people with disturbing accuracy. You walk into a room and within seconds you know who's tense, who's pretending, who's about to snap, who needs attention, who is lying without lying. Most people wait for words. You don't. You track micro expressions, posture shifts, breathing changes, the tone that sits under a sentence, the silence after a sentence. You became fluent in the unspoken, but it wasn't a gift you chose. It was a survival skill. When you were young, your safety depended on predicting adult emotions before they exploded. So your brain became a radar system. Your nervous system learned to scan for danger constantly, even when nothing is happening. That's why you can feel exhausted after a simple hangout. That's why you can leave a conversation feeling like you ran a mile. Because you weren't just talking, you were monitoring. This trait can make you an incredible partner, friend, leader, listener. You notice what other people miss. You can de-escalate conflict before it turns into a fire. But here's the cost. You don't just sense emotions, you absorb them. You take responsibility for them. You try to fix them, even when nobody asked you to. Your empathy is wired to threat detection. And when empathy is mixed with threat detection, it stops being compassion and becomes compulsion. If you want a practical sign, this is you. You struggle to relax around emotionally unpredictable people, and you feel guilty when you don't help, even when helping hurts you. Trait number 2, hyper-independence. That's really avoidance. People call you independent. You probably call yourself independent. But what you really are is self-reliant because dependence felt unsafe. You don't ask for help because somewhere deep inside you learned needing someone is dangerous. Vulnerability leads to disappointment. If you rely on anyone, you'll be abandoned, emotionally, physically, or both. When you were the child holding the family together, asking for support wasn't an option. Sometimes it was punished. Sometimes it was ignored. Sometimes it was treated as selfish. So you adapted. You became the person who handles everything alone. You became competent early. You became calm under pressure. You became reliable. And the world applauded you for it. Teachers liked you. Bosses trusted you. Friends leaned on you. People called you strong. But here's the tragedy. You're not independent. You're isolated. True independence means you can choose to rely on others when it's appropriate. You don't feel like you have that choice. Your default setting is, I'll handle it. Psychology often links this pattern to avoidant attachment, not because you don't want love, but because closeness feels like risk. Not because you don't care, but because needing is associated with pain. And this shows up later in relationships in a brutal way. You attract people who love being taken care of you, struggle to receive care without discomfort. You feel exposed when someone tries to truly see you. You disappear emotionally when you're overwhelmed. You can look cold when you're actually scared. If you've ever been told you act like you don't need anyone, and part of you felt proud, and part of you felt hollow, this is why. Trait number 3, borrowed maturity. You were told you were wise beyond your years, so mature, so responsible, so level-headed. But that maturity wasn't a natural development. It was a survival response. You learned to speak like an adult, think like an adult, comfort like an adult, because being a child wasn't safe. Being a child meant being vulnerable. Being vulnerable meant being a target. So you became controlled. You became reasonable. You became easy. But underneath that competence, there's often a part of you that never got to do the things children are supposed to do. Be messy, be reckless, be selfish, sometimes make mistakes without consequences. Be emotional without being too much. Play without guilt. And as an adult, this can create a weird split. You can handle crisis, you can handle pressure, you can handle responsibility, but you struggle with joy. Small pleasures feel foreign. Play feels forced. Rest feels like laziness. Relaxing feels like something bad is about to happen. That's because your nervous system learned to associate calm with danger. In unstable homes, calm often comes right before chaos, so your body doesn't trust peace. Psychologists sometimes describe a related phenomenon as developmental foreclosure, skipping stages of development because survival demanded it. You can't go back and redo childhood, but you can do something powerful. You can grieve what was stolen without minimizing it, because grief is how your nervous system finally stops pretending it was fine. Trait number 4, guilt-wrapped boundaries. Even now, saying no feels like betrayal. Taking space feels selfish. Prioritizing yourself feels like abandonment. You don't just struggle with boundaries. You struggle with the emotional consequence of boundaries. Because as a child, your boundaries were not respected. Your needs were inconvenient. Your feelings were too much. So you learned the safest strategy: shrink, accommodate. Don't take up space. Be useful. This creates what a lot of clinicians call boundary confusion. You can't clearly feel where you end and other people begin. You absorb their stress as if it's yours. You take on responsibilities that aren't yours. You feel responsible for everyone's mood. And then you get resentful. Not because you're cruel, because you're carrying weight nobody asked you to carry, but you don't know how to put it down without guilt. Here's the reframe you need. Boundaries aren't walls. They're not punishment. They're not rejection. They're the line where you finally get to exist without performing. And learning to hold them without guilt is one of the hardest parts of healing from parentification. Because the guilt isn't logical, it's conditioned. Your body thinks a boundary equals danger. So you have to teach it a new reality. Boundaries create safety, not abandonment. Practical example, a healthy boundary sounds simple. I can't do that. But for you, it can feel like, if I don't do that, I'll be unloved. That's not weakness. That's programming, and you can reprogram it. Trait number 5, the witness wound. This might be the rarest one. You see what other people miss. Patterns, pain, potential, the quiet signals, the hidden motivations. You can detect when someone is pretending to be fine. You can hear the desperation behind jokes. You can sense the childhood under the adult. Because you lived in a house where emotional truth was rarely spoken, but always present. So you became a translator of human suffering. That makes you powerful in a quiet way. You can help people feel seen. You can understand what's beneath behavior. You're hard to fool, but it also has a shadow. You can become the emotional archaeologist for everyone who enters your life. You start digging for reasons. You start explaining people's behavior better than they explain it. You start empathizing with the person hurting you because you understand their pain. And that's where many parentified adults get trapped. They confuse understanding someone with having to tolerate them. They confuse compassion with self-erasure. They witness everyone except themselves. So here's your permission. You don't have to save everyone. You don't have to understand everyone. You don't have to carry every person's story like it's your responsibility. You are allowed to witness your own life first. You are allowed to protect the child you were. What this does to men specifically, if you're a man who is parentified, you often learn early that emotions are either dangerous or useless. You learn to be the strong one. You learn that being needed is how you stay connected. So adulthood can look like choosing partners who need fixing, confusing love with responsibility, feeling restless in healthy relationships. Because there's no crisis to manage staying calm externally while your body is constantly braced, internally equating vulnerability with weakness. Even if you crave closeness, you become dependable but internally lonely. You become capable but emotionally tired. You become high functioning but not deeply safe. And the worst part is, nobody sees it because you look like you've got it together. The truth that changes everything. If you carry these traits, understand this. You are not broken. You are not too sensitive. You are not dramatic. You are someone who adapted to a role that should never have been yours. These traits that feel like curses are also evidence of something real. You survived. You stayed aware. You stayed intelligent. You stayed alive inside. But healing means something specific here. It doesn't mean forgetting. It means you stop living like the emergency is still happening. It means you stop treating peace like a threat. It means you stop confusing your worth with your usefulness. It means you become the parent you needed internally, not in a corny way, in a practical way. You learn to comfort yourself without collapsing. You learn to challenge yourself without cruelty. You learn to receive without suspicion. You learn to rest without guilt. You learn to be loved without earning it. The child you were deserved protection. The adult you are deserves rest. And growth doesn't stop just because you grew up too fast. It just means this time you get to grow on purpose. If you want more psychology content on trauma patterns, healing, attachment, and the hidden dynamics shaping your relationships, check the links in the description. No fluff, no fantasy, just tools, language, and truth. You grew up too fast, but you're still growing, and now you get to do it for you.